1, 2, 3.
While our weekly shows are edited to time for broadcast on public TV and community radio, we offer to our members and podcast subscribers the full uncut conversation. These audio exclusives are made possible thanks to our member supporters.
Perhaps you've heard of the Palestinian Exception. That's the idea that all sorts of behaviors and speech that are acceptable in other contexts are selectively denied and punished when it comes to advocacy around Palestine. Well, what if the treatment of Palestinians wasn't an exception, but rather a stress test, a test of our tolerance as a nation and as a people for cruelty and the consolidation of authoritarian rule? Go down the list that we have heard from every fascism scholar we've had on this program, and what do they say authoritarians do? They name an enemy, declare an emergency, and on that pretext invoke extraordinary, often military powers to shock and intimidate every credible source of opposition and dissent, including politicians, the law, the media, the academy, free speech, and even the truth itself. Our guest today has seen every one of those steps up close. A negotiator for the massive pro-Palestine student protests on Columbia University's campus in 2024, Mahmoud Khalil was arrested without a warrant by unidentified men in March. He was, in fact, one of the first and most visible abductions after the second Trump administration took office. Khalil was taken from his pregnant wife and transported 1,500 miles away to a Louisiana detention camp without access to a lawyer or any means of defense. A legal, permanent resident who had committed no violence and broken no law, the Trump administration sought to expel Khalil not for his acts, but for his, quote, beliefs, statements, and associations, which Secretary of State Marco Rubio wrote in a short letter would, quote, compromise a compelling U.S. foreign policy interest, close quote. 100-some days later, after he had missed the birth of his son Dean, a New Jersey federal judge rejected Rubio's case and ordered Mahmoud Khalil released. But this September, the administration came back, now citing errors on his green card application, and ordered Khalil to be deported, possibly to Algeria or Syria, where his life would be under threat. He has until the end of October to appeal. In the meantime, Khalil is suing the Trump administration for $20 million in damages, alleging that he was falsely imprisoned, maliciously prosecuted, and smeared as an anti-Semite. And we, as a nation, are seeing threats to free speech, assembly, migration, and academic freedom spread and spread and spread. Khalil is just 30. He was born in a refugee camp in Syria after the mass expulsion of Palestinians from the land claimed by Israel in 1948. He fled Syria for Lebanon in 2013 after joining protests against then-President Bashar al-Assad, and came to Columbia University to pursue a master's degree in 2022. Khalil has said he will continue advocating for Palestinians as his legal battle plays out, and that is exactly what he is doing. It is my great honor, privilege, and pleasure to welcome Mahmoud Khalil to Laura Flanders and Friends. Thanks for joining us. It is great to be talking with you, Mahmoud, and I've got to begin by asking how your family are. How is baby Dean and your wife Noor? She's been through a lot.
No, thank you so much, Laura, for having me. It's really a pleasure for me to be here with you. We're doing very well, taking it day by day. Noor went through a lot, especially during her late months of pregnancy and early days of a newborn. So now we're just making up for these days that were taken from us. And Dean turns 5 months just 2 days ago. So he's at this very precious time now.
Is it fun for you to be a dad? Are you enjoying it?
I am, yeah. I mean, you receive a lot of, I would say, like, I don't know, people would make it a big deal, but I mean, it's not. I love it. I really love it. Like I spent my night with Dean, so it was my turn sleeping with him, so like waking up with him, and I absolutely love it.
Oh, well, that's great to hear. I guess I start by asking about your people, but the next thing I want to ask you about is your place and Palestine, and not the Palestine of the war and the misery that we're seeing this minute, but the Palestine of your grandmother's stories, perhaps. Like, what is that Palestine to you in your heart, on your mind? What picture, perhaps, does that summon?
So I have it as a country for everyone, a country that treats all its people in equality, in dignity, giving them the same freedoms, not depending on who they are or their religion. Just like, you're a citizen of this country, you have the full rights and responsibilities. And this is what I am fighting for right now. I'm fighting for a country that would treat everyone equally, without apartheid, without occupation, without violence. And it's as simple as that. I don't know what is complicated about this, like similar to any country around the world.
Did your grandmother tell you stories?
Yeah, she did. I mean, my grandmother was my primary source about life in Palestine. And back then, I mean, Palestine was not an independent country. It was during her age, it was first under the Ottoman ruling, then for a brief time, like under the Arab rule, but then the British came. Um, uh, and ultimately the Zionists expelled her from that country. But for her, they lived in a very small village in northern Palestine in the Sea of Galilee, Tiberias, and they were farmers. So by the time that she left Palestine, she already had, I think, three kids, and the fourth she had to deliver on the way to Syria. And to be honest, like growing up in the refugee camp, I can see in her eyes um, the misery and sort of like just the longing for Palestine, for that life where she had her own house, she had her own land, and everyone around her just living in peace. And I've mentioned that before, but she had like Jewish neighbors, and she would sometimes go and work in their farms, as well. And at no point I felt any sort of um, uh, I would say anger or anonymity against, like her Jewish neighbors at all. And this is, I believe, what she was struggling with, that why now she lives less than 40 miles away from her hometown, from the village, in a tent or later a mud house, with no property whatsoever, um, having to go after, like, UN aid, having to like rebuild her life from scratch.
So, your commitment to Palestine and the vision that you've just shared is clearly part of what drives your activism. Concretely, how did you get connected with the movement that you became a negotiator for there on the Columbia University campus?
Absolutely. I mean, being a Palestinian, you're already connected to the movement of liberation, of your people. And at Columbia in specific, I was one of the very few Palestinian students on campus, especially those coming directly from a refugee camp or from Palestine. Like, we had few Arab Americans or Palestinian Americans who were like first or second generations in this country, but there were very few who were actually coming directly from the region. And I mean, since I left Syria, I had also this sense of a humanity, and in terms of, like, I want to find justice. I want to seek justice and dignity. So I started working with Syrians and Palestinian Syrian refugees in Lebanon and across the region, and came here, continued to do that. But here I was struck by the Palestine exception, by the the double standards against Palestinians, by the endless unconditional support to Israel in this country, but also by the dehumanization of Palestinians. So, I spent all my life between Syria and Lebanon. I traveled to Europe, but I never felt this level of dehumanization just because you're Palestinian. So if you say you're Palestinian, I felt that I have to um, like appeal to people that I'm just a human, I'm just like you. I play soccer, I go to cinema, like we're not like, just like violent and all of that. And I was struck by that, and that sort of pushed me more and more to advocate for the rights of my people and to actually have my voice out, like as a Palestinian, to speak about Palestinians, because Palestinians for ages they were declined the right to narrate, the right to talk about, because you always hear people talk about Palestinians and what Palestinians want, but not actually Palestinians say that.
Professor
And
Edward Said, who made his home at that
exactly.
university at Columbia, once famously was told by a newspaper of note that, well, you're not going to see translations of books from Arabic because, well, Arabic is a terrorist language.
Yeah, yeah, and the same, like I was struck by the same hypocrisy at Columbia, where I joined a Palestinian student group, and I was shocked that most of our events would be flagged as special events, although they are just as normal events as any other group.
What kind of events?
Uh, so one of them is literally we were hosting the director of Israel-Palestine office at Human Rights Watch, like a US-based international organization, to come and talk about human rights and international law in Israel-Palestine. And that event was flagged as a special event, and we had to fight to have this event happening. And then another one is the screening of a documentary, Israelism, which was produced by um, Jewish producers and directors. Yet, because it's an anti-Zionist film, the university also gave us a difficult time to screen that film.
It's a film made by people who were brought up as Zionists, explaining the reality, the understanding that they came to as they got older. So you get involved, and we've seen some of what happened in the film The Encampments that we featured on this program in the past. People can check that out. What we don't know is your story of March 8th, International Women's Day for some, but for others, the day on which you were, there's no other word for it, abducted. What happened?
Um, so following my I would say involvement in the encampment in April 2024, um, there was a very, I would say, concerted effort to dox me and smear me online by many shady groups, but also by Zionist actors at Columbia University. But I sort of did not care about that because, these smear campaigns were designed to intimidate you, so you don't speak. However, when Trump came into power, these threats became institutionalized. Like this anti-Palestinian sentiment has become institutionalized in a way that the federal government was depending on these shady groups to get information and to target pro-Palestine advocacy. Yet to be honest, like I was confident, nothing would happen to me. I never did anything wrong. I literally was protesting a genocide. I was in my university protesting against the use of my tuition dollars to be invested in Israel. So there's nothing wrong about that. Like I was very confident of that. Yet, like the week leading up to March 8th, I see the same groups mentioning DHS, Rubio, the White House to deport me. And then March 8th comes. I was on my way back from a dinner, an Iftar dinner with my wife, and it was a Saturday night. So, like we're looking forward to just go home, have a cup of tea. Noor was 8 months pregnant at that time. And yeah, that's it. And then we're surprised, as you said. I was followed by plainclothes agents in unmarked cars coming, just telling me like, you need to come with us. I ask, because here you think you have rights. So I asked like, oh, first, can I see your ID? But second, do you have an arrest warrant? And they declined to show me these. And at first they said your visa has been revoked. I was like, I don't have a visa. I'm here. I'm a permanent resident in this country. And I can see them like shocked that I told them that I'm a permanent resident. And on the phone, of course, I'm giving you like the very short version of what happened. But on the phone, like someone says, bring him anyways. So without showing me any arrest warrant, and then I was shoved into this unmarked car, being sent from one place to another. New York and New Jersey, then back to New York, Texas, Louisiana, and at that point I didn't know like what's actually happening around me. The last thing I heard um, before being arrested or while being arrested was them threatening Noor, my wife, of arrest if she doesn't leave me. And then when I was being booked, the last thing I heard that the White House is requesting an update. So imagine being in these circumstances where I was like, what's happening? That the White House is
Were you in
requesting.
shackles at that time? Did I get that right?
Yes, so I was in shackles basically during these like first 30 hours for most of the time when being transported from one place to another.
And any
And
call
that
to a
added
lawyer, any call to anybody?
nothing, despite my repeated requests to call a lawyer, to call my wife. I did like, and which is like the bare minimum. Like as someone, I studied public administration and public policy, so I understand the law very, very well to a good degree at least. Yeah, they refused to do any of that, as if they are acting extrajudicially, as if, and I felt it. I felt that maybe I'm being kidnapped. Maybe I will be, especially when, I was shackled, being driven in the woods of Louisiana for over an hour and being transported from one car to another. That was like, like what's happening? Like, is because I felt like really that what's happening to me was like maybe I would be killed now. Like I don't know where I am.
So, yeah, and I'm just thinking you fled Syria for fear of exactly this kind of
Exactly,
treatment, and
exactly.
came
And
to the U.S. expecting different and better. Now, it took a little while, but eventually Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, releases this short letter claiming that your beliefs, opinions, and associations pose some kind of threat to U.S. foreign
yeah,
policy
but he
and to
said he
U.S.
said
interests.
something he said something there that's really alarming. He said my beliefs, activities, associations otherwise lawful. Like he concedes that these are lawful acts. These are lawful associations. So in the same letter, he concedes that what I'm doing is lawful, but despite that, I want to deport you because, you know, I see this as a foreign policy threat and compelling national security a threat, which is absurd, like at so many levels. And rightly, a federal judge ruled that the Rubio determination, or this letter in specific, was unconstitutional um, because it's unheard of that the US government throughout history used this particular provision in the law against someone for their political speech. They used it against the Shah of Iran. They used it against an attorney general from Mexico, not against a lawful permanent resident in the United States.
Move to the future, to the current situation, and that case against you has been thrown out by the judge, but now
No,
there's
I
a new
mean,
one.
so basically, the federal judge did say it's unconstitutional. The government is appealing that now in the appellate court. But it's clear, like I think the government realized that they can't win on that case. Now they fabricated a whole new case that I made some willful misrepresentation on my green card application when I applied there, and it's merely like utterly, to be honest, like I would say disgusting that they are resorting to such tactics, fascist tactics, like literally fabricating a whole case. I wasn't even asked about these allegations in my court hearing, in my immigration court hearing. And this is something I believe the American public does not know very well, is that immigration courts are not actual courts, are not, Article 3 courts or like independent, I would say. They belong, or they report to the executive branch. They report to the Department of Justice and the Attorney General. So the immigration judge in that case basically did not look at the case, and they just wanted to find me deportable. And this is what happened now. And we're still also like we're challenging that, because it's clear it is in retaliation of my First Amendment rights in this country.
Hi, it's Laura. Independent media is a collaborative project, and you play a critical part in it. This show is made possible by our viewers and listeners, not corporations or advertisers. So join our member supporter honor roll by going to lauraflanders.org/donate to contribute. That's lauraflanders.org/donate. And please stay kind, stay curious, and commit to supporting this no ads, no gimmicks, not all about profit show, again, or for the very first time. Thank you. In the meantime, we've seen other people abducted. We've seen, anonymous people sent to other countries in flights that foreigners have to kind of track via GPS. We've also seen the language ratchet up in this country. Most recently, Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, Donald Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, described the Democratic Party as not a party but a domestic extremist group. Do you think my suggestion that this so-called exception is actually a test of our acceptance of authoritarian or fascist rule holds?
And I mean, the administration was not trying to hide any of that. They said that my case would be used as a blueprint, as a test case, to go after everyone who they don't like their speech. And this is happening now, whether it is with Jimmy Kimmel just last week or any of that. This has been happening to Palestinians and to pro-Palestine speech in this country for a number of years. The anti-BDS laws across states criminalizing boycott and divestment, Palestinians being targeted in their universities, their jobs, and now they're extending this to the rest of us, to go after everyone who they deem a threat. And if you don't fit the definition of what an American is, according to Stephen Miller, which is you should be, a blonde with the blue eyes, then you don't belong in this country. You should be deported. You are a threat, which is very, very dangerous. And as you said rightly, in your introduction, this government thrives on division. They want to create, they started with visa holders, green card holders, citizens, then they extended that into naturalized citizens and, US-born citizens. But also when they go into that, now they're challenging the birthright in this country. So it doesn't stop anywhere, really, and unless you fit that narrow definition of what an American is.
So it does seem to me that this administration is very good at targeting the weaknesses and the potential divisions within the resistance, as you might say, or within the progressive population. One of those weaknesses, obviously, was around Palestine and Zionism and the state of Israel. Another weakness around white supremacy and racism and the history of this country. A third, perhaps, might be people's lack of awareness, understanding of trans identity and LGBTQ life and liberties. In the most recent releases from the administration of which groups they're targeting, you see those exact groups targeted. Black Lives Matter, JVP, you name it. If it's true they're going after weaknesses, this is a big question, do you think we are more weak or less weak now than we were?
I believe, like it's unless people like unite and see through these tactics, unfortunately, we are less weak because I mean, we are weaker.
Weak. Remain weak.
Because this administration has been preparing for this thing since their first term. They have the project 2025. They have the Esther project Esther as well, on how to use alleged anti-Semitism to go after speech as a whole in this country, and to go after liberal institutions, to go after higher institution, higher education institutions. So unfortunately, unless we see through that, we're weaker. And with the current democratic leadership, a shameful leadership, I don't think the situation would get any better. And especially with also the Palestine exception, when you can see that the democratic leadership and establishment, they are so weak on this, and this is why the Trump administration are using like Palestine. They are using like the pretext of anti-Semitism and combating anti-Semitism to go after us, because they know that this is the weakness of the Democratic Party. And when they go to the universities, they start with combating anti-Semitism, but then the second ask would be to abolish all the AI programs, to sanitize the history on slavery and the inception of America, and the list goes on and on and on.
So you were a negotiator. You were an up-and-coming diplomat. You were here partly because you were interested to be near the United Nations, where you might get to be a diplomat someday. So you know about dealing with people in delicate positions, let's just say. And I'd like to hear what you've learned about how we could combat some of this weakness, come together over issues that make a lot of people uncomfortable. I mean, this October 7th, we're going to see a lot of discomfort over what happened and different experiences, and people feeling their lives, their families, their own stories under threat. What have you learned? What can you teach us? You are, at this point, I think, are an expert.
I mean, it's just like from my experience, I would say, and for these exact reasons, the students and faculty at Columbia selected me to negotiate on their behalf. And I believe, like it's not about Israel, Palestine, or any of the groups. It's about, to me, it's a rights-based approach, that we are all humans. We are all should be treated equal, and we should fight together against injustices. Now, the injustices that's happening right now by this administration, that's trying to dismantle American institutions, American values, human rights, international humanitarian law. They're trying to dismantle all of that. So and unity is the approach, and unity in a way that it's a rights-based approach. The right of people to live, equally in freedom and in dignity. And unless literally the people wake up, like I think now the problem is a lot of people got so used to Trump, and they say, like, with every action they would say, oh, that's just like Trump, that's just another thing Trump is doing. But I think people mistakenly think that what's happening is far from their doors. They think that this would never happen to them, whether because, because of their social status, because of their ethnicity, or any of that. But what's happening around us, like, should alarm us that this is at our door. It's in our house, and it's not about that the US is becoming authoritarian. It is authoritarianism now. Like, I lived under Assad regime. I know how that feels. And now I can see um the same attitudes around me wherever I go, with whomever I talk to. So we literally live now in authoritarianism.
That hasn't stopped you fighting back. You have brought a civil lawsuit. What's the status of that right now?
So now this, like, the legal system takes takes a long time in this country. So we'll file the federal case very soon, to take the administration to the federal court. And this is about accountability, because to me, silence is not an option. I know if I'm silent, that wouldn't really vindicate me, or wouldn't make my case any better. And they would still come after me, and after anyone else. And the cost, or the moral cost, of remaining silent is much higher than, any of these costs that any of these, like, costs that may happen to me, or happening to me right now. And I will continue to seek accountability, whether through this lawsuit, but also, I go frequently to Congress now, like, just to lobby and advocate, not only for my case. It's for the stop of the war, but also, like, raising the alarm about what's happening now around us.
Around you in that detention center in Louisiana were migrants of all sorts, people being detained and threatened with deportation who had been in this country for decades, some of them. Do you think about them? Is there anyone you're in touch with? Anyone who you think about in the middle of the night, or maybe in the day?
No, I think of them frequently, and I'm still in touch with some of them who were unfortunately deported without due process. And what was the most difficult part of that experience is the dehumanization that these people went through. Seeing on TV themselves being called as criminals, as, like, all these, like, sort of libels. And for most of them, they're just here, like, looking for a better life. They are already in the process of becoming documented. A lot of them were literally taken from their court hearings or ICE check-ins. So they were not, like, fleeing or, like, not abiding by the law. No, they are literally in the process of getting documents. Yet they find themselves in a place, without any rights, being separated from their families. And that's what was difficult about this. And, like, it took me over 25 lawyers, to get bail. Um, Imagine the hundreds of thousands of people who barely have one lawyer.
You have spoken about your determination, and it comes across loud and clear. There are some who would say, at what price the truth? At what truth is worth fighting for? And again, perhaps as in your expertise as a diplomat, how do you answer that question? What's worth fighting over, and what should
You
people
know,
just
I'm
let go?
I'm I'm fighting at a time where tens or hundreds of thousands of my people are being massacred, starved to death, maimed by the hour, and at a time where we're all being dehumanized, or our rights are being stripped off us. And once again, like, when I think of the risks, like, what risk is that in comparison to someone who's now, like, under bombardments in Gaza, or waiting at a checkpoint in the West Bank, or expelled out of their home at the hands of the settlers. So that's how I talk about it. And to be honest, like the fear is real. Like it, there is fear. There is exhaustion. I want to be able to spend my time with my wife and son, and build the family that we have always dreamed of, like just being people, normal people, and like take the subway, go to a Broadway show. That's what we want. Like we don't want to live this life, but I can't get to that life if this continues.
Over 150 countries, member countries at the United Nations, have now recognized the state of Palestine, the country. Will that make any difference?
Um, it makes very small difference. Unfortunately, it wouldn't make a difference to those who are being killed and starved on the ground. It may make a difference, like strategically in the coming years. But like we hundreds of thousands of people like shouldn't have been killed for other countries to recognize Palestine as a country. So that's basically my response. I mean, it's nice, like it's good, but is it? Like, we want to make sure that there are people remaining to live in this state that they are now recognizing.
There are some heroic resistors, especially among young people, who would be subject to the draft in Israel to serve in the so-called Israeli Defense Force. Increasingly, we're hearing their voices. They're speaking up. There are some others inside Israel who see in their own leader a similar kind of fascist authoritarian who has his own self-interested reasons to stay in power and is as unresponsive to any sanction by international law. What's your thought or your message to those people inside Israel and those who are close to them?
Um, I mean, there's absolutely no excuse to serve in an army that's committing a genocide. So I absolutely applaud those who are, resisting being part of such a genocidal army, a genocidal state at this point. And to me, as I said it before, our liberation is mutual. Our liberation is intertwined. You can never achieve Israel's security without giving the Palestinians their full rights, and vice versa. So this is why I believe in our collective liberation, and my liberation shouldn't come at the expense of anyone's liberation, and vice versa. Like I don't expect, Zionism is could be a noble ideology of creating a home for the Jewish people. But when that comes at the expense of my people, here's the problem. So similarly, I wanna be able to realize my self-determination, respect others' self-determination, and just like live in dignity, freedom, and justice, prosperity.
Is there anything you would have done different in the last few years, given how this has played out? And I guess one last question is, would you recommend to other young people like yourself to come to this country anymore? I'm glad you came, but I think we're losing lots of talent.
So answering your first question, I mean, you can always communicate better. You could have, you can always done things differently. But the core thing, which is opposing a genocide and advocating for the right of your people to be free, I wouldn't have changed that. And once again, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything immoral or unlawful. So that's the thing. And regarding your second question, um, I mean it's difficult. The state of the United States right now and the rights here, it's very difficult. And this is why I'm fighting. This is why, because I wanna be able to raise my children in a country that respects them and respect others. So this is why I'm doing it, to be honest.
Well, that takes me to our last question, and the question I ask all of our guests, which is, what do you think is the story the future will tell of this moment? But in your case, I think I'll just adapt it. Like, what do you see as the future for Dean? What do you imagine his life might be? I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now.
I mean, this is a very difficult question, and in your first question, I don't want people to reflect on this moment. I want them to act now, to stop us from going after 30 years and feel bad about what happened now and create a museum for the Palestinian people, or like all these like gestures that would happen. That's why I'm fighting right now, and in 20 years, to be honest, it's so difficult, like um to predict. And I always said it, like I want Dean to live in a country that respects him and all his people, as a humans, as equal humans, and human beings, and a place where he can proudly call himself like an American, a place where his tax money does not go toward funding war crimes or weapons being used in other parts of the world. That's my hope. Will that happen? I mean, I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful with in the new generation, who's seeing, this genocide unfolding in front of their eyes and refusing to remain silent despite all the the opposition, despite all the repression against them, like the students at Columbia, 17, 18, 19 years old, who are risking their degrees, their futures, everything to speak out for the truth, to speak out for human rights. That's what keeps me hopeful, and what's actually now keeps me like fighting, not being like, just sitting and wait for my fate.
Do you see a path to that future? Like, what do we do?
Um, there's absolutely a path, and when there's a will, there's a way. I absolutely believe in that, despite how this administration and the establishment, those in power, want us to think that we are useless, we are hopeless, and we don't have a chance. No, I absolutely believe we do have. And it's in our hand. And as Bernie just said, I believe, before me joining, like I believe that the people are now being like awakening to what's happening around them, to all the atrocities and the practices around them, and they're acting, and they believe. It may take some time, unfortunately, very unfortunately, but that's why we need to keep fighting and never take a break. Absolutely.
Bernie Sanders said that in a prior interview on this program. People can check it out in our archives. Mahmoud Khalil, is there anything else you'd like to share, ask, express?
No,
It's
I mean,
been really a
that's all.
pleasure to have you.
No, thank you so much, Laura, for having me and for having this space.
Keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to the full conversation. These audio exclusives are made possible thanks to our member supporters. Please join our members now by making a one-time donation or by making it monthly. Go to patreon.com/Laura Flanders and Friends. That's also where you'll find our episode notes for more information on this conversation. That's patreon.com/Laura Flanders and Friends. And thanks again to all our member supporters.